many times am I going to record my response right after I do show rehearsal? I don't know. So let's find out. Okay, so I don't know where to start. So I guess I'll start with, how did Belle frame Bial and Brady? I think Belle framed Bial and Brady because if we're talking about performative utterances and our identity through performativity and performative, and so I think Belle frames it in performative utterances. It's not true, it's not false, it's more unhappy, and versus happy, you're saying something to say it and take up space in that way, but in the sense that you don't want to take up space in the physical way of taking up space. It's more of the verbally. Yes, no, that's what, I am brain dead as always, but you know, what's comp's brain to do? And with performative utterances, we take up space. It is an act. It is not true nor false. Like when you break it, it's unhappy. You fail a performative utterance, it's unhappy. But when you get it and you do it, it's happy. There's not really what is a successful performative utterance or performative. There's nothing successful and there's nothing failing. You're either happy about it or you're not. And in a sense, it's weird because it contradicts if it's successful, which is true, or if it's unsuccessful, which is false, but it's not false and it's not true. Yeah. I honestly think this is the first time that reading Belle and Bial, it didn't help understand it enough. I don't know how to word what I'm saying. So in Belle chapter 7, you're talking about self, and I really liked the gender identity of self because I've never thought about gender identity in a way that a lot of people probably have. I honestly didn't know about a lot of what gender identity is and the difference between like sex and gender until I got to UNT. So I'm still very new to gender identity, and I like that there's different parts of gender identity. There's biological, psychological, and a sexual difference, and that how all of them combined or individual locate a true identity, but they're all on different grounds. So what is identity? And I feel like this is like it's like common sense, but it's also like weird, like you don't think about it. I like how gender is readable and that you can assume. I feel like gender being readable is a very easy way of assuming somebody's gender, or yes. And I really liked I don't know why, but I really liked the bathroom part of this chapter, and that how gender identity and things are there's boundaries that are put on the wrong bodies or the wrong space, and how boundaries are materially embodied. And I think that's kind of a cool way of looking at it, because we all have boundaries within ourselves, and when somebody crosses those boundaries, it's a very unsettling feeling. And reading the bathroom debacle reminded me of my sophomore year in high school. We had our first transgender person, and there was a whole debate on what bathroom they were going to use. They were transitioning from male to female, and for the longest time they continued to go to the guys' bathroom, because they started to go to the guys' bathroom, but when they went to the females' bathroom, they got beat up. And then they'd get beat up when they went back to the guys' bathroom, and there was no gender neutral bathrooms. And so I honestly don't know where they went to the bathroom after they got beat up. I know they left school, but they came back. So it was like for a whole year, there was a lot of gender violence in my school, and I never, like, I know small towns are normally conservative and traditional, but I never thought it would get that violent. So we're normally a really nothing happens in that town until it has to do with high school. And so I liked how Bell simplified performativity in like 3 points. It's a theory of identity constitution, it's a strategy for critiquing performances, and it's political. And how performers materialize characters through their body. We process is through the body. It's another one of those embodied knowledge. I know it's kumbaya, but it's like nothing is not embodied knowledge, and we know how to fall in and out of characters or roles that we place every day on ourselves. And I thought it was very cool, or not cool, but very unique, I guess, that gender is improvisation with constraints. And that makes sense, because we can put whatever we want on ourselves to a certain extent. We can put on whatever show, we can put on whatever physical body, we can put on anything physical, tangible, or physical, emotional, or anything. But no matter what, even if it's our choice, it still constrains us. And identities our identities are negotiable. And I feel like it makes sense, but I feel like people shouldn't negotiate their identities as much as society wants them to. It's all falling back into the normatives of society, and I don't know, something about identities. I know identities can be negotiated in a good way, but it's very unsettling to me. And when it talks about like the stories, like identity through different things, especially family, that kind of set hard with me. Like I don't have I don't have the experiences with gender through family as others do. But I do agree that family stories can silence people. And that is a very real statement, because with my family, with certain parts of my family, I grew up very tomboy, but in certain parts of my family, I have to be very feminine. And I know I'm a feminine person, but I am not a sparkles and glitter pink tutu. I know I have tutus for my show. That's 100% more of the aesthetic, but I'm not a girly girl, if you want to say. I have my sparkle moments where I want to be that feminine, but I don't like having to switch back and forth, because especially having to take out some of my piercings and my body jewelry, I have to take that out for certain members of my family because it's seen as non-traditional feminine. But when I'm around other parts of my family, like my parents, I can have my body jewelry, I can have my piercings in, as long as I don't make it obscene about them. But it's when I go to different sides of it, I've got to take them all out. And they're a part of my identity, and I'm silencing my own identity, trying not to have a fight, because I know if something happens that they're gonna be like, well, why are you wearing a dog collar? Because they see chokers as dog collars. Like, why are you wearing a dog collar? You're not a dog. And it's just this is my body, it's my choice, and my body should not offend you, and if it does, that's not my problem, because you're supposed to be my family, you're supposed to like love me. And it's that, and in that sense, I agree that we can put on, I don't want to say I agree, but it makes sense to me that we put on and take off gender, especially if you grew up in a very tomboy aspect and taking off that more masculine side of you, because I believe men and women both have their masculine and feminine sides. And I don't know any other nicer word to put it, but girls can be more masculine and guys can be feminine. It's a different part of identity. It's especially if a female has grown up working in a setting that I grew up in, so on a farm, on a ranch. Our bodies have limitations to what we can do, but we are seen as like a working, outdoors, getting dirty kind of breed, whether as some other women stay in the kitchen and they're seen as these little dainty things. There's masculine sides, and you can flip that with men too. Working is more masculine while being inside is seen as a more feminine, more labor, and it's I'm getting into Butler with gender roles at this point. Okay, I'm gonna briefly touch on J.L. Austin, and then I'm gonna come back to J.L. Austin. I think it's funny. We've been reading J.L. Austin in JT's class for a while now and talking about performative utterances. So I'm gonna go back to that. But I do like how all of these, I get what you're saying when you're sitting in class, that they connect together. And I think if I feel lucky because I had to do Austin first. I feel like if I had anybody else, I'd start with them first, and then none of this would make sense. So I'm really glad I got J.L. Austin. But I'm gonna go to Derrida. So I liked how Derrida really emphasized on the language that we use and how different languages, different coded, and how coding can be successful or unsuccessful. And it goes back to that performative utterances are not true or false. They're more happy versus unhappy. And we have this really weird, I think it's called graphematic, is that how you say that? Structure of communication, where we're choosing our words very carefully because we are wanting to act on our words, but we're not wanting to do our words. It's in and out of bound breaking, and so that's what I got from Derrida. Butler, I don't know how many times I'm gonna read about gender trouble with Butler. I kid you not. It circumferences me in everything I do at this point. I like Butler. It's when she's talking about active process of embodiment. Oh man, I didn't tap this. My bad. Active process of embodiment, and that the body is a set of possibilities, and one of the possibilities is that it appears in the world for perception and is not permitted by some manner of interior essence, and that it is a concrete expression in the world and must be understood as taking up and rendering specific of a set of historical possibilities. It's the body. I'm reading that as like the body is a side of knowledge, and it is making its statement in the world, like I'm stating that my appearance means something, and I am expressing and taking up space to this for this exact reason. And she goes on to talk about gender as a corporal style itself, and how performative has a double meaning. It's both dramatic and non-referentational at the same time. And it's formulated in the body. Performative acts enforces revisions. So we're constantly revising ourselves, we're constantly revising others, and focuses on shared experiences, and it's all a collective act. It's constant and consistent in reality, interior and exterior self. Okay. Moving on quickly to Parker. Back to performative, and performative utterances are not true. It's not false. It's more happy and happy. It's speaking, but it's not itself in particular ways which our words are spoken. It is or not itself. It goes back to, then Parker ties back into rituals and ceremonies. Performative utterances are ritualistic, they're ceremonial, and they're conventional acts that constitute the question, what is a successful performance? And I like the Elode, I don't know how to say that, this E word where it gives the 4 definitions of those. Yeah, I don't know what I was gonna say about that. Okay. But what constitutes a successful performance, different identities and orientations through performativity. I like that we have those identities. We have orientations through certain parts of performativity. And then actions can only be performed by persons. Yeah. Fabian? I don't know what to talk about Fabian. I read that, and through his personal narrative, I kind of read it as how Fabian, their experience, they incorporated everything that people were already talking about in a more example form, considering it was only like 2 or 3 pages and not even full pages. So, yeah. And Dolan. I thought it was weird, and it probably makes sense in a different reality for me that you end on utopians. But if we're talking about successful, like what is a successful performance, and utopian performances are supposed to be successful in an ideal world, then that makes sense. But I got utopian performances, they're beyond the now, and like we're looking to the future of what we want. But utopia itself means no place. So if it's beyond the now, it's beyond the no place. So I'm sure it makes sense in some way, but I don't know. I don't get it at the moment. And I like how the utopia aspect of this, it's like, how do we place ourselves in a utopian performative? How do we place other people in our audience in utopian performative? And it talks about how we consume experiences in our own performance. So we consume ours, we consume others, we consume everything in our own performance, and it's like, at some point we're gonna break. But utopia is a process, so if no place is a process, I get it's anti-structural. But is it like a black hole? It's like that rabbit hole that we all want to follow, and like, boom, it makes sense. So we follow that rabbit hole in this no place until we have this weird idea. Like, I don't know if you know this about my show. My show idea originally was to talk about how mythical creatures are identities. Like, our identities through mythical creatures. That was the first before we got to Harley Quinn. That is a very weird rabbit hole, how we spiraled down there. I don't know. Let's go back to Austen, because I don't want to accidentally forget Austen. Austen. More performative utterances. We believe in this. Austen. Performative utterances is doing rather than reporting something. It's described as saying certain words. Best example is I do or I promise. There's no true or false, but it's rather happy versus unhappy. And things that can be, will go wrong. If it's gonna go wrong, it's gonna go wrong. So on page 206, I do not know how to summarize how this is gonna. So it's talking about performative utterances. So there must be an existent and accepted conventional procedure having a certain conventional effect. The procedure to include the uttering of certain words by certain persons in certain circumstances, and further. Particular persons and circumstances give a case that must be appropriate for the invocation of the particular procedure invoked. There's time and place for everything is what I'm getting this. The procedure must be executed by all participants both correctly and completely. I do, you do, I promise, you promise, let's pinky swear. Where it is often the procedure is designed for persons having a certain thoughts or feelings for the inauguration of certain consequences of conduct. The procedure then must fact those thoughts, feelings, and participants must intend to conduct things further. And they must actually conduct themselves subsequently. So a performant utterance is an act of doing it. An act of saying something with the actual intention of actually doing things. So I liked when it says, now if we sin against any one or more of these 6 rules, our performant utterance will be in one way or another unhappy. In the ways of being unhappy. So if we fail, it's not going to be a happy or positive performative utterance. So when it says, thus say I promise and have no intention of keeping it, I have promised that. We need names for referring to this general distinctions, so we shall call those in general inflectices? Is that how you say that? In inflectices, you go into purported or empty, professed or hollow, preferred or professed. And then you have like the without effect, without consequences, or without results and without effects of those. And that how they can be misinvocations. Among them, we reasonably christen the second sort, where the procedure does not exist at all, but it can be implied as perpetrated, so that's misapplications. Hence, okay. And so I had to really look at this part on there. It's like the A-B conversation, and I don't know if my brain's just overloading with this, but I don't know, it makes sense enough, but I don't know how to explain how it makes sense. My problem exactly. And so we have the sense of performing actions with our utterances. So it's like first is performing actions, second utterances are performatives that also air to certain other kinds of ill will, which affects all utterances. So if you do something wrong, it's gonna go wrong on the other one. It's like a chain reaction of performative utterances. And that leads to inflexy, and out of misunderstanding that it's necessary that somebody has to do this, but it doesn't mean that it's always meaning, and meaning that it's been heard by somebody, but perhaps it's the promises, and it's have been understood by a person promise. So it's like this, like I understand, but I don't, but it's Austin. It's Austin. And then lastly, are these certain understands like I do and I promise mutually exclusive? No, it's not, but it can go wrong in at least two ways. Like you promise can do it and you do it. You can promise something and you don't do it, nothing bad happens, but you can promise to do it and you do it and something bad happens. So like it's right or wrong. It's like a lose-lose situation most days. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. Have a great weekend, peeps.